Welcome into Film Tank, the weekly podcast that covers both new and classic cinema. On this episode of Film Tank, we discuss the 2018 version of Halloween, directed by David Gordon Green, and again starring Jamie Lee Curtis. If you would like to get in touch with Film Tank, you can always email us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Film Tank Show. And you can listen to all of our episodes on our website, filmtankshow.com, or on iTunes. And now, here are your hosts, Nick Cheney, Toussaint Egan, and myself, Alex Diekman. Hey there, everybody, and welcome back into Film Tank. This is episode 172, and I am Alex Diekman. Along with me today, Nick Cheney.
Hey. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Pretty good, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Toussaint Egan, again, not
Hi.
here. Hi, again. Hello. This isn't a call-in.
Oh.
You're actually here.
Hello? Okay, yeah, just ignore me.
I was gonna say you're seems like you're kind of getting on a weird Chris Farley thing from SNL. That's all right.
That was awesome.
Do you remember back when you were in the Beatles? Yes, I do. Okay.
Hi.
Toussaint Egan is not here. But our friend Kenny Marcellus decided to drop by again for his third episode in the last 5.
I'm back.
I know, that's almost a record.
It's almost like I'm back in the show.
I know. And then Halloween's going to be over, and he will not be heard of for another 11 months.
He'll be dead.
Yeah. Until
I say that in in Film Tank world, you're dead. And then Halloween comes and you're resurrected.
Sure.
That's really well put.
I like it.
Next year we'll start doing horror movies, and all of a sudden Kenny's ears will perk up, and I'll be like, what?
Somewhere a pumpkin's being trashed.
Okay.
Hi.
So, yeah, boy, this is off to a just wonderful start. Oh, man. We've had a lot of great starts on this podcast.
This one's one of the best.
It's up there.
I agree.
It's a topper.
Yep.
It's in the...
Put it on a cake. Because it's a cake topper.
Oh. Okay. So, we are talking about
Make sure the stripper still has an air hole. Because there's a stripper inside this cake. This story is very elaborate.
Yeah.
This is why I'm back. Not for the horror talk.
No, it's for this.
Right here.
Not that Nick doesn't do these kind of things, but today feels like a special occasion because he is just... he's got his A material out today.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So today we are discussing the new Halloween film, Halloween, which is a sequel.
With the same name.
Correct, which is bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, this is retconning the entire Halloween franchise other than the original.
Absolutely.
So definitely a different direction from the story with Laurie being related to Michael Myers, and anything that happened throughout the rest of the entirety of the franchise, and pretty much just a continuation on what it would look like 40 years after the massacre happened. So the film is written and directed by David Gordon Green, although there were other people who assisted him in the screenplay, including Danny McBride.
Yeah.
Who
Kenny Powers.
Yeah. Which was an interesting addition to this. I guess I just don't know the whole story regarding it, if he was just a really enthusiastic fan who always wanted to make a Halloween film, or how exactly this played out.
Much that's what it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Once he knew, because he works with David Gordon Green all the time as a writing partner, and then David ended up directing the stuff. But basically, it was, from what I understand, Danny selling David on the idea and whatever he had in his head. They hadn't even written the script, but he was just like, "I'll write it if we can do this," and pitching it to Blum.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay.
You call him David Allen Green?
No, David Gordon Green.
Oh, yeah. I thought that's what I heard. Sorry, my bad.
Did I say Alan?
It's all right.
Yeah.
Holy fucking shit! All right, let's start from the top.
Well, there's no way it could be worse than what we've done so far, so it might actually be a good idea.
Hi.
God damn it. So, in this version, Laurie Strode comes to her final confrontation with Michael Myers, the masked figure who has haunted her since she narrowly escaped his killing spree on Halloween 4 decades ago. So the film does bring back Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, although she was in Halloween 2 and she was in Halloween H2O.
And Resurrection.
She is now...
So this is like her 5th appearance.
But the character, just like the rest of the universe,
Yes.
only exists in this film as if only the first film happened.
Correct.
Also here is Judy Greer playing her daughter Karen, and Andy
Karen.
Karen.
She literally had the moment where she shouts Karen.
Really? That's
yeah,
great.
When Karen won't stop talking to the cops and she wants to get her in the house.
They should have gotten Will Patton. Not Will Patton. I'm sorry. He's also in the film.
He is in the movie.
He is in
They
this
did
film.
get him.
They did. Wow, way to go. He's such
Wish fulfilled.
Boy, he's a tough one to get out there. They should have gotten Ray Liotta in this film just to say that, and also to do a Chantix pitch.
There we go.
And then Andy Minachik is the granddaughter, who is the Laurie Strode stand-in here, pretty much. Her name is Allison. And as I mentioned already, Will Patton is in this film, and some other people who you probably would recognize, but you have no idea who they actually are. You've seen them in TV shows or commercials or that kind of thing. Although I will mention this guy's name, which is Jabrail Nen Tambu, who plays Julian, the child who's being babysat.
MVP.
I was going to say, his inclusion in this film was actually, I thought, pretty good.
Yes.
Because he wasn't, like, over the top like the kid in Role Models.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was also funny. So it just kind of worked.
For that 5 minutes, he was a delight.
Yeah.
And
it was
he wasn't in the
realistic.
film for the rest of the movie either. He was,
yeah.
So what were you going to
Yep.
say next?
I was going to say that was a moment when the film was attempting comedy, but that's exactly sometimes how babysitters talk to their kids because they want to relate to them and whatnot. So, yeah, no, absolutely. He was great.
Yep, and the way that whole scene played out, I thought was quite wonderful. And, yeah. So, last year, we did a comparison episode talking about the original Halloween and the first Rob Zombie Halloween film. And now here we are with the second film in the Halloween series, the second try at the second film. Actually, it's technically the third try at the second film because Rob Zombie also did Halloween 2, which is much different than the original Halloween 2, which has nothing to do with this version.
I love that the attempt here was to get rid of the canon of this franchise and get rid of the confusingness, and really it just made it more
To be
confusing.
fair, and that's exactly what they were trying to do, but also the fact that they were trying to hit that home, it's just kind of like, you know what, to be completely honest, I feel like almost every Halloween sequel basically forgets what the hell has happened. Like there's
every horror movie.
Well, yes and no, in the sense that that is like how we think of horror movies. But you watch the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, even though those are new character, whatever, they are very clear in that this is that person's neighbor. Like they will, there is a continuity there that actually makes sense, even if those movies get worse and worse as they go on. And even Friday the 13th, like at least they're saying things like, "Oh well, this is." Camp Crystal, whatever, is closed, whatever. The second movie made them brother and sister for no reason. The third movie had nothing to do with anything. The fourth, no, like literally.
I know, but it's just the way you said it.
The fourth movie has, obviously the curse being passed on, so that's a whole other magical voodoo thing. Later on, Laurie's able to kill Michael, but then they both come back in the one after. These movies are the worst when it comes to like timeline, like more than any other popular horror franchise.
Which really, it's only on the strength of Michael Myers that it's even remotely acceptable. It's kind of mind-boggling how convoluted and shitty and messy it's all gotten, and is still such a strong brand.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I
thought
it was odd that they tried to correct that and just fucked it up even more. But anyway, you were saying we reviewed and compared the original and the zombie. I don't know where you were going with that.
No, I was just kind of trying to
tie it a
little bit together. I mean, if you would like to hear our thoughts on those films, you should listen back to that episode.
I was there.
You were. Well done.
Hey.
Great job, buddy. Gold star. This Halloween film, Kenny obviously really wanted to talk about it, and we've actually been planning this episode for like half a year, so it's very exciting that the film came out and we all got a chance to see it. And I think Nick should go first because you are really into horror films, and it's been not a new thing for you, but over the last couple of years, it's really become a bit of an obsession.
Yep. Well, that's how I treat everything in my life.
Yep. That's why you're always calling me. So, I think you should.
You ever really liked a girl, but you just couldn't have her?
That was a really good line.
It was.
That was a good scene too.
It was.
Yep. That wasn't a serious question to you, by the way.
Oh,
even though you answered it.
Wait, what was your question?
Oh, I didn't have a question. He brought up the line and then you answered it.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Do you?
I understand what just happened.
Okay.
Hi.
I knew it was coming, son of a bitch.
Swear to God, we're not high or anything. It's
Hi. I was just repeating what you said.
Okay. This is really going great. So anyways, Nick, why don't you start us off? And again, we've already pretty much killed 11 minutes with saying nothing and being awkward. So why don't we try to make
yourself, bitch.
Try to make the next 11 minutes a little better.
Yeah, I was really excited for this movie. Mm-hmm. I had pretty much Alex, you were pretty much almost always texting me when a new trailer would come out or whatever, because I'm really bad at keeping up with that shit. And so I because of you, I was able to be like, oh, every step of the way, the poster, that the first image of Jamie Lee Curtis up on the.
That was great, by the way.
Yeah, you know, whatnot. So I've been very much looking forward to this for a lot of reasons. One of them being that the Halloween franchise is fun. It's not my favorite horror franchise, even though the first film is easily one of my favorite horror films. I think that's actually the difference between Halloween and all of its brethren, is that Halloween is the only franchise where I don't know that you could really make a case for any of the sequels being as good as the first film. Whereas, I'm all ears for which Jason movie is your favorite and which Freddy Krueger movie is your favorite, because they are so wild and weird, and there's, they do something different in each, whatever.
Well, the first ones of those aren't really classics. I mean, you could maybe make a case for the first Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, but you're right in the sense that it's not so much that because Halloween came first, those were just kind of oh, let's make another one because horror is a big thing, and that's when it got weird and fun and whatnot. But I gotta say, I was pretty slightly underwhelmed by this one. Mm-hmm. I pretty much thought the last 20 minutes or so was fantastic, so it was worth it in the end. But the build up to it was not great, you guys. Mostly, I thought all the quote-unquote pre-Halloween scenes, Halloween being the day, not the movie, were pretty bad. A lot of much to do about nothing. The podcasters was a very pointless thread. The opening scene was laughable.
The opening scene
right.
gave me a very late Saw vibe, which is not good.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that, and but mostly with the one podcaster screaming at Michael with the mask saying, "Speak, say something." It just felt like a parody almost. Like it was so over the top in a way that these movies aren't usually, because the whole point is these are very quiet movies. These are very, it's always Michael, and yes, Michael doesn't speak, so it's not like he's, in a Woody Allen film or something. But
was
I
missing something with that opening scene? Why
No.
with the like the checkered tiles? Like, is that just
that was just
art
an aesthetic
thing
choice
that they were going for?
Which probably they did because that scene was boring, because that actually is one of the better parts of that scene in the sense that it's the set dressing and that it looked cool.
Distract you with something to look at.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
the scene was, like you said, laughably awkward and weird, and
especially because I know at one point I told Alex that from the trailer that I loved that. Like, I'm like, oh, I love the look of the asylum when you see, because they were very smart and did not include any of those lines in the trailer. And so, yeah, I just thought that was pretty bad. I also felt like we saw way too much of Michael before he put his mask on.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. And I know we don't see him head on, but it was still...
It was a good half hour of the movie where you were seeing a lot of action from Michael with no mask on.
And yet, this movie pretends like he's still the Shape if he's this guy with a really nice beard. Like, seriously, that's well maintained, and I'm not entirely sure who would put a razor to him or give him a razor to... keep that looking really good. Just saying.
I believe Michael Myers, before he puts the mask on, is played by the same gentleman who played him in the original.
All I know about what I've read before the movie is that whatever his name is, who did the original, I forget his name, is only in one scene of this movie.
Really?
Which is the scene in which he first sees Laurie.
Oh.
I don't know exactly what that meant from a review, but in all other scenes, both with and without the mask, he was played by a different... Yes.
And I knew that he was played by a different... But I thought...
but no, he is only behind the mask in the first time he sees Laurie, which is kind of a pointless Easter egg.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's on. Yeah. But yeah, there was a lot of attempts at comedy, which actually did not ruin the movie for me, like, because the bits that worked was funny, and the bits that didn't did not come during a particularly scary part, so it didn't like derail the film, so to speak. But yeah, overall, I just thought this was such an easy movie to get right, and yet it doesn't often. I don't understand why they didn't just stick to the basics and make Laurie the new Dr. Loomis, and I don't mean that literally, like, not, you don't have to make her a doctor, but she should have been the character who was, like, even though she is, obviously, somewhat, but it should have been less of this PTSD, I'm going to trap myself in a house, even if I love that sequence, but that's just because that's the best part of this movie. But I still think it should have gone down the road of Michael ends up stalking somebody, and she's aware of it because she is hyper-vigilant in this day and age on Halloween and with the bus, whatever, but that she becomes the person going crazy, just like Dr. Loomis was in the original. Like, he was literally acting insane almost throughout, and nobody really wants to indulge him, so to speak. And that should have been, I think, her role in this. And it's okay if that's if the final confrontation is between the two of them. Like, it is about her. But to rope in 2 generations of women while thematically on point in 2018, just not enough characterization there for me to really care outside the obvious, winking at the #MeToo audience. I just thought that was kind of... I feel like they only did that so that way whatever young girl would get stalked would have to be related to Laurie. So then they went 2 generations because of that. And, I felt like there were a lot of weak spots. I thought some of the kills were good, and I know, Alex, you're going to mention this, but some of the kills would have been even better if we could have watched them. And, I'll pass it off by saying I think there are some bright spots in this movie, and I would watch it again. But, man, I kind of am surprised that they didn't really nail it, because budget-wise and I thought cinematography-wise, and I actually did like Carpenter's score for this one. It had all the right ingredients, and I like these actors, and I'm all here for a David Gordon Green slice of realism in my Halloween, but unfortunately he didn't quite get it together.
Yep. So I overall thought this film was actually surprisingly mediocre. much like you, Nick, and I'm assuming that the popular reading will be that the climactic scene is wonderful and a lot of things that surround it are not great. And I will say this, though. When this movie does things well, it does a great job with them. The scenes, all of the stalking and killing scenes, for the most part, I think all work really well. And the scene where the teenage friend who tries to get with Allison, the daughter, and then she turns him down because she's not interested. And then he's saying he's drunk and all the usual high school excuses. And then he has this very wonderfully bizarre conversation with Michael Myers in somebody's backyard. And that leads to the best line of the movie for sure, where he's like, man, do you ever just want to be with a woman and she's just not, just can't get her? And it's just like, oh man, that's just perfect writing and well placed. And a lot of the tone in that scene was perfect. And then you have that scene lead into the climactic 30 minutes of the film where we get the finale that is involved with the chase going to the house. But at the same time, everything basically before that, other than a couple of high points here and there, was very boring. And I think that the film really struggled to get into its story because there's no story to tell here, really. The story is Michael Myers is on the loose again, and...
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Because I'm not here for a story. I think that was kind of the point, is that this wanted there to be a story. I mean, we have scenes in where she's dealing with alcoholism and crashing her granddaughter's, not crashing, but, showing up. That's family drama that doesn't quite work I mean, that's kind of what my thing is, that there's almost too much story and there should have been more of just creature of the night.
I suppose, but at the same time, we don't really get a lot of that. A lot of the creature of the night scenes are good in of themselves, but they last for about 30 seconds, and then we go...
That's what I'm saying. There's not enough of that.
I got
and there's a little too much in that first 40 minutes of, we're here for an interview, and we're here to speak to Michael, even though Michael doesn't speak, and we're... seriously, this is what we're spending our time with.
They tried to get him to speak.
Yes, and now we're having family dinner, and now Dad's a cool dad, now we're in high school, and it's amazing how much you learn about Laurie Strode in the first movie, despite the fact that you're never not just following her in school for a second, walking home, and then babysitting.
Well, I feel like each time that they attempted to sort of introduce a new storyline, they would either botch it somehow or leave it open-ended awkwardly or just kind of get in their own way and fumble with telling that storyline. And it just felt like a lot of so we mentioned the episode we did about a year ago where we compared the original and the zombie version of the remake. Mm-hmm. Nick, as you were just saying, it's amazing how much we learn about Laurie without it being too overly explained in the original one, and that was great. It's part of what makes the original so good. Zombies remake, I've said before, if you're going to remake something, at least make it worth remaking. Add something to it. So with Zombies remake, we got an overabundance of explaining the backstory of Laurie. Fine. With this one, it was a very awkward attempt at doing both, I feel like, and it just didn't do a good job of it.
No.
I don't know. Alex, were you done giving your sort of general thoughts on it, or?
I mean, in general, yes.
Yeah.
But overall, I think this film really missed the mark for the most part. It felt like this film was just kind of rushed together, which is kind of weird because it seems like there was no... If you don't get this film out by October 2018, you're a failure. So this isn't a Marvel film that's on a strict deadline. So the idea that they kind of had and maybe they just, in all honesty, they wanted to make a film with Michael Myers and an older Laurie Strode, and they accomplished that. I don't know really what else you can do with this franchise. I mean, there's really not much there. This franchise, at least in the films I've seen, and there's been quite a few others, but unlike with somebody like Jason or Freddy Krueger or any of the other horror icons, like there's been no venturing outside of Haddonfield. Like this is where the story's always taken place, and it's almost always just been a rehashing of the original film. In usually a not as good bag. So I feel like this is a very so-so film that had high points and low points, and is just kind of there. So that's the end of my general thoughts.
Okay, I'll give my general thoughts. Hi, Nick. I'm gonna need a little bit of thought on this, and definitely
take your time.
This discussion to sort of figure out what my thoughts are. I'm very perplexed right now by this movie. Like,
okay.
I don't know really how to feel, because there was a lot of good to like, and then there was a lot of not so much to be confused and disappointed with. So, I feel like I think the reason I'm sort of just like, that's it? Like, that's all you got for us? I think it's only because they went out of their way to just dispose of the rest of the franchise, almost as if to say, like, it's almost like John Carpenter sitting back and was like, okay, this has finally gotten out of hand enough. I'm gonna crack the whip, and I'm gonna rein it back in, and I'm gonna finally right the ship. And they came in like they were gonna fucking correct.
It's the first film since the second that had John Carpenter's blessing and involvement. So yeah.
So it's almost like he said, I've seen enough. I'm sick and tired of this franchise being treated this way. I'm going to come in and I'm going to drop the bomb that's going to actually like correct the ship here.
It feels more like he's like, ooh, a payday.
Yeah. And it's just like, this movie would have been fine had you taken the premise of it and just been a little creative with it and just had it be another Halloween movie. Like this, there's no reason that this final product we got was not good enough to just disregard how many other movies?
True.
I mean, it's very, I don't know. It just feels a little bit strong-handed to be what it is. Like I said, there's good things about it, which we can get more into, but it just felt a little over the top to be like, no, this is the direct sequel. We're finally going to get it right. And they didn't.
Before I saw this movie and I heard that they were going to disregard everything, I'm like, oh, okay, like what you just said,
sure.
They want to do this, whatever. After seeing this movie, I'm actually convinced that they're disregarding the sequels because they haven't watched them. And I actually mean that as an insult. Like, that they're just, they don't seem like the writers of this movie does not seem like they truly love Halloween, other than maybe the first film, which I totally get. But it just kind of lacks that. I mean, this is a movie where Laurie Strode says to that doctor an actual line, "You're the new Loomis."
Yeah.
Like, that's really bad. Like,
Right.
That is someone who's like, oh, I don't know. I can't believe that made it into the final script.
I mean, the stuff that was good about this movie is what you like about Michael Myers and what would have made it live just being another Halloween movie. It's all this bullshit that they tried to rewrite the sequel to the original, where they fucked it up. Like, that's where it fell on its face. Like, I just think it just didn't execute what they were really going out for, where they really should have just been making another Halloween movie. Like, it's fine as another Halloween movie. It's serviceable, So I'm not going to sit here and say I was, angry about it or, like, very upset or I'm going to bash it or anything like that. Like, it was fine. It was, it's decent.
I think if the final 20 to 25 minutes isn't as intense and as well put together as it was, that this film easily could have been a failure, in my opinion.
Pretty much, yeah.
There were a lot of moments in the movie where I found myself bored.
Yeah,
Kind of
absolutely.
like, oh, man.
I will say one great scene besides the final act is the bus scene, I thought, the way it was shot and
Oh yeah.
with the boy. Mm-hmm. Like that was like I was genuinely like, okay, we're ramping up here. Like like just any horror movie starts off a little whatever.
Sure.
But everything in that sequence I thought was fantastic, from him and the dad making the very bad choices of getting out of the car, whatever, and him shooting the doctor. I'm like, oh wow, this is like a literal ball of chaos. But it,
and then it really died off after that. It didn't really.
I kind of hate to say this about a horror movie because it's not the sole purpose of the genre, in my opinion. But I also didn't think this movie was scary. I thought, other than the final act in the house, that was the only time when I was even like slightly on the edge of my seat, because they were certainly playing it up. But all of the scares, I guess I wanted them to be scarier. Like, it was weird because normally that's not my thing, in the sense that I don't care about jump scares, but I actually wanted there to be more in this movie.
You always saw Michael Myers coming here.
Yes.
And I think that this film really struggled with that aspect.
Yes.
Because it seemed like even though the camera was like always looking for him, which is fine, that's a pretty normal horror movie trope. For the most part, he is always in the frame before he actually gets there, which is really bizarre.
And you take something like the scene with the drunk high schooler and the whatnot. When that's a scene where on paper I'm like, I'm all on board because that's like the motion sensors going on and off. I'm like, that's a clever scene, so you know how that's going to play out the moment that it starts. But even with the final gotcha scare, when the lights come back on for the final time, it's weirdly muted. And no, I don't need a James Wan like slam the piano as loud as you can. Like, I don't need it to be that ridiculous, but I also feel like they were trying to make this extremely mass marketed, where anybody could watch
What
this.
was the
and
rating
not
on this
be,
movie?
It was rated R.
Sorry.
Really?
Well, there's the head squash and the
Say fuck.
yeah.
That's
4 or 5 times.
It's a pretty
It's
light R, I would say,
Gotta
for
be
this
the
kind
lightest R I've seen in some time.
for this genre. I would say, but yeah, like I just thought some of these weird quote unquote jump scares were very muted in a way where it genuinely did not want to offend anybody, and certainly the original Halloween is not so much that that's a jump scare movie, but kind of is. There's some great stuff in there. I mean, nothing in this movie comes close to Michael.
Pretty much the same guy.
Yeah. Michael jumping out for the guy who goes to get beer from the fridge while his lady is upstairs, after he then puts on the sheet to go upstairs. That whole sequence has a million different scares layered in at each beat of that scene. And there was just nothing that even came close to that level of... other than the final, I would say, flashlight sequence with Laurie basically having all the rooms but one locked down and having
That was wonderful and
it
brilliant.
was.
Yeah.
And that was
That's
fantastic.
what that's what people who watch horror films would be like. Just make sure you trap him not able to go in the rooms to hide.
But
There they did it.
I'll say this, and I watched the first 40 minutes of Annabelle Creation, the sequel to Annabelle, and I actually watched the first 40 minutes and turned it off, basically saying, like, I'll finish this tomorrow, because I was, like, did not want to continue, because I'm like, this is getting fucking intense. It was like 1 a.m., but I'm like, you know what, I can just savor the next, because it was getting fucking scary. Whereas this, I was just kind of like, I could have fell asleep. Like, just as far as, like, noise and whatever.
Before the ending, my favorite scene actually happened right around the middle part of the film, when you see Michael Myers through the windows going back around the house, and a woman is on the phone, and she's just a random character. And then he comes in from behind, pushes her against a window, and stabs her through the neck, and you actually see the knife going through. Unfortunately, that was the coolest kill of the entire film for me.
And when he stomped on the doctor's face.
I've seen head stomps before, and it's not like this one was bad, but at the same time, again, this is a film that's a horror film that had a pretty high budget. Like, I'm expecting some good work here.
Yep.
And I feel like a lot of the killings were off screen, which makes no sense to me. I mean, it makes sense in a film like Hellfest where you have literally no budget. So you need to pick and choose where you're going to show cool things. Where this is like, here's this really cool kill scene, but you didn't get to see it because we just didn't want to do it.
As someone who's been watching a truckload of 70s and 80s, like indie, low-budget horror, it's amazing how many of them, even if they suck as movies, have much more, I would say, effective kills. Not so much that they go crazy with, whatever, like with ingenuity, but they're like, okay, we're going to show this, so why don't we just literally take a can of cat food and drip it in red paint and just throw it at the camera? And I'm not saying Halloween has to go so far into the Jason level or whatever, but yeah, for it to be all half off screen. Also, 90% of the kills were the same. I think I said that earlier, but he had a very weird fixation on jaws, whether it would be through the jaw, just above the. I don't know. That was just a weird thing that kept coming up. And then the the drunk dude, on the fence
post.
It was just kind of weird that
guy
kept
in the early on in the movie when he had broken his jaw and he was laying on the desk and his face was like,
that was another jaw thing.
Yeah, it was a weird. Yeah,
kind of seemed like David Gordon Green doesn't watch a lot of horror movies.
Also,
and he just got the idea for the jaw thing. And he's like, we need more jaws.
So I am just body-wise confused on something. So he's got the 2 cop bodies burning like jack-o'-lanterns. How did he remove all of their insides and get their skin to stay like that? I know it's a silly Halloween movie, but what?
So here's what I'll say about that scene. Why that scene didn't work for me is not for what you're saying.
It's not because the skin was burning but not burning?
No, but because we didn't get to linger on it, I forgot that was in the movie because when the reveal happened, they cut away very quickly after. And I kind of wish that there was more to that now. Now that I'm remembering that happened, that was one of the cooler things, but clearly they didn't have the budget, quote unquote. I don't know. Can I say writing-wise, though? Mm-hmm. Why doesn't Karen... Why doesn't Karen have a single line referring to her husband getting murdered?
Because he's inconsequential after he's killed off.
I mean, he is, and I didn't need her to, do a soliloquy about how her marriage was the greatest thing that ever happened to her, and blah, blah.
As soon as he's gone, the plot has written him off. So
I thought there'd be one line where Laurie goes...
It's a real bummer that he was locked up on your closet.
Yeah, I just thought Laurie was going to say something like... Or, no, not even Laurie, but she would say something like, "Where's Ray?" Like, why do you not... I don't get that at all. Literally, that's...
Oh, I don't know.
Horror characters make...
We could go look, but I just burned the house down, so we're fucked.
Horror characters make stupid choices, but that makes no sense.
That's a good
that
point.
it's not even addressed.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And she's very excited to go downstairs, and yet... I don't know. I just don't understand.
I mean, the only thing I can think is because they're in that finale when there's the twist of like when she snaps into her oh yeah, I do know what I'm doing and I'm all game for what's going on here, is maybe she was kind of like a psychopath to begin with and her husband was just part of luring him in and he was just a sacrificial thing. But
nah.
I mean, it sounds crazy, but a lot of this fucking movie was kind of crazy.
I'm not willing to buy into what you're selling.
I don't really buy it either. I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility because I hadn't really thought about it until...
Yeah. I mean, with these films, they're so open for any sort of fan theories. But I think that this film is actually super straightforward, and almost to a fault, actually. Everything in the opening scenes with the podcasters who will probably be made fun of for the rest of time. The problem is when this film ages 10 or 15 years, that's not going to be any funnier. It's just going to be stupid. And it's disappointing because those are the kind of characters that you look back and you're oh, these stupid people, they're so dumb. But no, you're just going to watch and be like, why are they here? It'll almost be like watching the opening scene from Saw 7 when they're having that weird, bizarre thing where all the people are tied to the machine and
that
yeah.
I was thinking of something else.
It is the more times I watch that, the more I'm like, this is not getting any better with age. This is just getting dumber.
Yeah, it's never good to age yourself with like current technologies or things that are going on. And
No, but
as we sit here in podcasts and make
yeah.
fun of the podcasters, I mentioned when we were discussing before that I feel like personally that was. But I don't know, because now the more we're talking about it, I don't think this movie was smart enough to be taking these sorts of stabs at. But I thought the podcasters getting killed off pretty quickly was just sort of the film's way of sort of having a commentary on, like, people like us who sit around and podcast, and all of a sudden they think they're like journalists and they're going out and they're trying to get to the bottom of this story, and it's like, no, you're just fucking podcasters. And
To be
you don't
fair, just really quickly, I mean, what we do is that. But technically, podcasting as a medium has led to things like Serial, which
Sure.
was an actual
Sure.
piece of media that actually opened up, a cold case. And
But these people in the movie very clearly traveled from England, I'm assuming. And
Yeah,
they
something like that.
Showed up to Laurie's house like with no invitation, and they were just like, "We have $3,000. Just let us in to talk."
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like,
Well, no, and I
what?
think that's
What?
the point. Like, they probably worked for not a podcast in someone's home, but like an NPR or something where
They just
like,
seem
this
like
is
fanboys, to be honest.
well, and that's the thing. But and if that's what they were going for, then they should have pushed it even more. And instead of trying to be like, "Oh, Laurie, you don't have any children with," like, it was so weirdly personal. Instead of just being like, "Oh, is it true that his mask changes every year?" I don't know. Like, if they would have just went full Scream, I think those characters would have worked. But because they are, for some weird reason, rooted in reality in an uncomfortable way that just does not gel with Laurie's story at all, it's just really awkward.
Yep. I would concur with that. So, yeah, when we see Michael Myers multiple times without his mask on, it's not the first time that that's happened, because he's always got to get his mask
True.
and get his jumpsuit. But I'll agree with what the thing that you guys had hit on a little bit earlier in the episode, that we see like the side of his face probably like 30 times before he actually reacquires the mask 45 minutes into the
It's
film.
the first third of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's weird because they're so purposefully not showing his face, which they should not. But because they're not doing that, it's only calling attention as to how much we're still seeing due to these really kind of poorly edited shots trying to conceal his face. The fact that I basically now know what he looks like ad nauseum, is just kind of a weird feeling to come away from. I mean, he's called The Shape for a reason, and I'm like, no, he's actually just a dude with a really sick-ass white beard who just kind of looks like Richard Attenborough, and it's just weird.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Oh.
And then he murders people because he's Michael Myers. That's why he's trying to draw people off his scent
Yeah.
by having a
So
dinosaur theme park.
I'd like to point out some things I did actually like.
Let's
because
do
we've
it.
been
Yeah.
largely very negative about this so far.
I think it's because we're all, well, I think at least me and Kenny are disappointed.
So am I.
Yeah.
Oh, you, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a disappointment thing, but
yeah.
that said, there are good things about it, and when you stop trying to sort of figure out what they're trying to do with the storyline is when it's okay. It's when it's doing fine. It's at its best. I think his mask looks great in this movie. I
Yeah.
think he looks very menacing once he finally gets his
Yeah,
act
that
going.
mask in Halloween 4 was
Oh,
something.
the convenience store mask.
Yeah, that was not a lot of money was put into that.
Yeah, that was sort of intentional, though.
That's fine.
Because anyway,
That's fine.
It doesn't matter now because this disregarded all of that, so none of that matters
Doesn't
anymore.
exist anymore.
I very much enjoyed the scene. I cannot remember the kid's name, but we've already talked about it a couple times where they jump the fence and they're in the backyard and the lights, the motion detector comes on, and I thought that was all very, very, very well done. I loved that Michael Myers was just hanging out in the backyard and the kid drunkenly thought it was his neighbor and was sort of having a conversation with him.
It would, yeah. The other thing that too is that this series never makes Michael Myers, at least in this film, at least, he is never like a real person at all. Like even Jason at moments will do things that are comedic that Michael Myers I don't think does.
When he goes into that random woman's house and stabs her in the back of the throat, he's walking through the house and there's the baby crying. And for a second, I thought he was going to fucking kill the baby. And I was like, holy fuck, they're going to go there.
Yeah.
And then he just didn't do it. And I was like, oh, okay, well.
Killing babies is an extreme
No,
poor taste.
I get it.
No, and that's why I was actually disappointed that they teased us like that, because I don't need
why would he leave
Right.
Why would he care that it's a baby?
Exactly. Like, he's supposed to be the boogeyman. Literally, like, he's talked about as someone who is, like, left his own body, so to speak. Like, he is this force of evil.
And that's kind of why I'm saying, like, that's one moment where he's actually not the boogeyman.
Exactly.
Like, he
so to
actually
give him that only makes his character worse.
Yeah. He does have, like, this thing where he's always, he saved his little sister, and, like, No.
He killed his sister.
Are
you talking about Zombie?
The zombie version,
Yeah,
yes.
which is
I'm just saying, like,
in that movie,
you said they never
those,
portray him.
No,
as,
no,
like,
those two movies are completely different.
Yes,
that
are.
blows the lid off of Michael Myers as
Right.
a force of evil and actually makes him a human being. Behind the mask, obviously,
Yes.
but he's got a stripper mom, and he's got, like, literally, like, all that is there for you.
And you get the transference then at the end of the second one. And at any rate,
But
more
he should have killed a baby.
Okay, perfect.
All of
Thank
that
you.
just to say he is
Sure.
given some humanity.
He's given humanity, but he's, I guess, more what I was trying to reach at is that he will never do anything for comedy, really, where all of the other horror icons are pretty much open to play along with a comedic part of films.
Yeah, which is, I think, fine for Michael
Yep,
Myers.
absolutely. Well, yeah, for him to be
Yeah.
menacing
Right.
and not have, I mean, like, that is the most you're ever going to get is him
That's his
standing for an
thing.
extra few beats to
Yeah.
let the scene play out.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, no, and that's most of what he has going for him as a horror villain. But yeah.
Right after that scene in the backyard where the kid is killed and hung up on the fence, which I actually, of all the kills that happened off screen, that one was probably my favorite. I
Sure.
did kind of like when they finally did reveal, like, the fence post through his mouth and everything. Thought that was pretty great. But then, like, the panic ensuing after that, I loved. That was the one moment with the music that
that was great.
I fucking loved it. Like, that was finally at that moment. I was like, all right,
They
finally
brought in
they
Hans Zimmer for 3 beats.
yeah. They sort of took the main theme and did a little something with it. That
And they do that actually a couple times when the babysitter's boyfriend sees the motorcycle. The way he goes into that garage when you don't know, but that's what he's looking at, is the Halloween theme slowed down.
Yeah.
Where you're only hearing the first two, like, bars, not the first two, but whatever, of that piano, whatnot, which I thought was actually pretty great.
I feel like immediately afterwards, and I'm already warming up to it just talking about it a little bit, I felt very disappointed with the score of this one. It felt very
It's
subdued.
attached to something very disappointing.
Yeah. But it just felt obnoxiously subdued and toned back. But thinking back on it, I think upon further viewings, I'll probably grow to like the score a bit more. And obviously the finale was most excellent.
I mean, yeah, the finale, pretty much everything about it, the suspense built up, was just second to none. Like, it was just wonderful, and
And I'm so glad that they actually used the house, because I got burned earlier this week with Bad Times at El Royale. When we see the house for the first time and we get to see all what that house entailed, the bunker, the door locking mechanisms, everything, whatever, I'm like, this is going to be bullshit if Michael shows up, goes through the front door, and then just chases her around a room. Like, like, if all that gets, but no. It's,
chased her out the window at one point, and
True.
it was a really cool callback.
Yes, that was
something
actually
else
great.
I really liked when she fell out of the window and he sort of went looking for her and she was gone, and
Yes.
there was this moment of, what the fuck?
That was great.
I thought she just died.
yeah, that was perfect because the idea of the story being brought back on him is wonderful. I will say there seemed to be, in my opinion, an abandoned storyline of Michael having this supernatural power that affects people around him when he's in his murdering mode. And it happens early in the very first, that terrible scene, when all of the other people at the hospital are pretty much all like almost like to their knees, frightened that this force is coming. And it's mentioned also by the terrible Loomis stand-in, who also murders Will Patton for whatever reason. That was such a weird.
Yeah, why would he murder him? Like, even if he has the, the brain to want to do the shit he wants to do, like study Michael, like,
yeah.
So he's gonna study him, but then go to jail, like.
Yeah, and he's also gonna put on his mask for whatever reason.
For like a second.
Yeah,
it was one thing if he would have put it on and then like Michael kills him and like you're not Michael.
Very much along the lines of your supernatural storyline that felt like it sort of fizzled out and fell apart. Like it was more in the writer's room, but then sort of was cut. And
I think that they film more scenes for that and abandon the storyline.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It seemed to me
the terrible Loomis stand-in also felt like a storyline that maybe was meant to be more. And then because that scene when he kills that cop was so fucking awkward. How I don't remember what he said to Michael Myers when he got out of the car, but it was almost like he had this moment of realizing like, oh, now it's my turn to like almost vicariously be Michael Myers and like.
Well, he had this idea that Michael Myers and Laurie Strode like needed to like have each other. It's almost like kind of what.
Which is what the podcasters say, because they kind of talk about how. Like they really want her to go see him, and that's the only reason, whatever. But it's weird because we're never given any indication that doctor thinks that way because we don't spend any time with that doctor. We see him in the asylum, guiding them to Michael, and then he's knocked out for half the movie, literally unconscious, and then he wakes up and he'll stab a cop just to put those two together.
Rob Zombie will remake this one 10 years from now and explain the shit out of his character.
I hope not.
Only because I don't want to see an explanation on that character.
Yeah. That's a no for me, dog.
Yeah. You know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing. I will say a negative about the very finale of this film. In the end of the scene, I felt like with all of the build-up, the release we got when the three women are fighting Michael was only like 10 seconds long, and it should have been more like 30 or 40 seconds long because I feel like you need to have something to feel worthwhile that there is a battle going on between those three women and him, where it feels like stab, 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 push him down the stairs, and then we're going to close the stairs with these things. Also, too, he should have gotten caught in that. That would have been fucking awesome.
Yeah. I'm with you in the sense that clearly the image that the Green and McBride want you to leave with is the three women standing over him as they literally burn him to death. Mm-hmm. But I don't care about the three women. I only care about Laurie. Mm-hmm. So the idea that the entire emotional crux of the climax is going to hang on two characters we barely know anything about.
And really don't care about?
And don't care about. And one character who was basically, in my opinion, sorely underused in her own 40-year sequel. That was just kind of... It was weirdly finite too. Isn't Michael always supposed to like get away? I know they don't.
No, he's still alive. Come
on. No, I'm not saying he's dead.
He's still.
But there always has to be kind of like the point is there's always that moment of like, oh shit, like he's not like, him getting up off the ground in the very first film. I mean, that's just from the very first one. The idea that they walk away and it freeze frames on that idea is weird to me.
Yeah,
it seemed. Sorry, I was gonna say it seemed like Jamie Lee Curtis would only do it if it was quote unquote a closed loop, within the script.
I suppose.
I mean, the whole thing's got that feel to it. Like, they just disregarded the rest of the sequels to begin with. What makes you think they're going to play along with that rule either? You know what I mean?
I'm not saying, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, again, if Michael Myers is coming up through the floor and gets caught in that, I mean, I think that for me, that's the problem with this film is it actually sets up these really cool kills and then either does them off screen or doesn't do them at all, which is very bizarre. And I think the image of him trapped in the floor, burning to death, would have been a lot more powerful than him just creepily staring through there, almost like a puppy dog.
Yeah.
And then his body is just
true.
gone when we go back to it, which I guess is supposed to say he escaped. But if you want to go through this whole thing that they burn him alive and all that, like, don't you want to commit to that, especially in a redo? I mean, that's why, even though the final climactic scene was wonderful, that part of it just felt like a final nail in this movie's coffin for me. That it was a little, although I do love the final image of them in the back of the truck and going out onto the knife being in the girl's hand, which I actually thought was wonderful.
I mean, yeah, that's I agree with you, but also the credits are about to roll, so it's like at this point, thematically I'm there, but also I'm like, oh, good, the freeze frame, we're done.
Also, too, the computer-generated redo of the original intro was a big miss. I thought.
You didn't like that?
Oh, I like that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was. I mean,
it was
kind of silly.
It was cheap and whatnot, but
I think
it was the kind of cheap that I wanted.
And I think it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did
I
you
was
not
just
like the
kinda like,
pumpkin sort of blowing back up like
No,
a
no,
balloon? Is that what?
I like the idea of that, and I thought that was cool. At the same time, I just feel like it was the sight of the pumpkin during the credits was so much better in the original that it felt like this is just trying to riff off that, but not really.
It was.
So,
I mean,
I understand that. Yep.
I don't know what else they would have done.
No, it's a complaint that is not really that big of a deal. I'm just looking for things to bitch about now because I'm a Star Wars fan.
Speaking of Star Wars, because I just had
Let's do this.
I actually just had a thought. I'm trying to remember. Did Michael Myers come across Allison by chance? He didn't find Allison, who played the
by chance.
Laurie's granddaughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty much by chance.
By chance.
Because he killed that dude.
Sure.
And it's only because she goes back to look at that death.
That's the first time they were face to face.
Yeah.
And I just found myself thinking, like, I get it. It's a convenient way to convey the story, but, like, why? I guess my issue is, like, why?
But he doesn't follow her.
Well,
he goes to Laurie no matter what.
But then there was, like, that moment where she escaped the cop car and, like, he almost, like, had this thing where it was like, I know you're part of this family. Like, I'm not done with you yet. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't understand why.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
I get the same feeling that I've gotten from Star Wars lately where it's like, can we get away from this family? Like,
right.
Why can't we just get a Michael Myers story that's unrelated to this family? Like, why does it all have to tie into this family? Because it makes it sort of absurd. Like,
I think you're kind of touching on what I think, that I only care about Laurie in this movie. Like,
yeah.
If it wanted to be the Laurie sequel, then it should have been that.
Sure.
But the idea that we needed to see these two generations of people we don't know whatsoever, and Laurie doesn't even really know, just kind of made it slightly trite.
And Michael Myers being the boogeyman and just killing people, whether they're random people or not, like, that's really all I'm showing up to see is the kills. Like, I don't need it to stay all in the family this whole time.
Also, too...
Boy, the way Glenn Miller played.
Oh, wow. Well done, sir.
They made the hit parade.
Those were the days. Those were the days.
I am so confused right
That's
now.
the All in the Family theme song.
Yes. No.
I was gonna say, if you've never watched All in the Family, you are doing yourself a disservice.
No, I got it.
Okay.
Now I'm getting it.
Okay, yeah.
Hey,
Liberace. Sorry.
My.
Cause we call the men woman. If I get you the man again. Sorry.
This is where we've gotten to. That's
Oh,
great.
yeah.
So, we've done a pretty good job covering this film, I think.
What do you guys think of Laurie herself?
Well, of course
Like,
we did.
what-
We're podcasters. We follow every lead and thread.
Mm-hmm. I thought Laurie was actually very much not a great character in
Yeah.
this film.
Didn't
Well-
like her. I didn't like what they did with her.
I don't mind what they did. I just didn't like how they backed it up, so to speak.
I can see that.
I'm still think Jamie Lee Curtis was fantastic with what she had.
Mm-hmm.
But
In the
it-
field.
I'm
It's not as good when you don't say it.
sorry, buddy. Oh, sorry. And where was I? Oh yeah, I. Ooh, boy. What was I gonna say? Oh, Jamie Lee Curtis. I thought she actually was fantastic in this movie, so I'm very much here for a version of this movie, just not necessarily the version that we got.
What about you, Kenny? I know you kind of basically said that you weren't a huge fan of her, and I wasn't either, because I think that her character was very one-dimensional here, which, again, it's a horror film, but at the same time, I've been holding this for 40 years, so you'd think there'd be a little more here.
Yeah, and it's kind of tough to put my finger on what it was I didn't like about her, other than it feels like a total disconnect from the Laurie we knew from the first film. I understand, like, supposed to be getting Laurie who's dealt with this trauma of death and all of that, but
We only know Laurie pre-Halloween.
But the two characters just seem so vastly different, like incredibly different. Like the personality given by this Laurie, I don't know, maybe I'm just looking way too far into
no,
it.
I mean-
I'm with you in the sense that
Yeah.
I liked that, and yet I don't think they did it well enough to justify it.
I mean,
Basically,
this is what 15 straight years of a diet of only Activa will do to you. So,
Makes sense now.
I mean,
got it.
seriously though, I mean, like, you will become a crazy person who looks like Norman Bates' mother. So,
Well, and the other thing too is that there are good ideas in this movie with her and her character, and yet the movie doesn't actually understand what's compelling about her character, even when it is displaying it. For example, I thought one great thread that should have been pulled on was when she blows into town to the land of suburbia, so to speak, away from her compound, because she knows he's back, and she just comes out of a car with a shotgun telling everyone to go home and whatnot. And you see 1 millisecond of a cut of some parents saying, "Oh my god, we have to leave now." But like, it should have been like Laurie versus the world. You know, like, it should have been slightly more of a I don't know, just a buffer between her and Michael, because while they are at battle, so to speak, I feel like the rest of the world would be like, whoa, you can't just be waving a gun in the middle of the street, like, even if there is a Michael happening. And,
No, she teamed
and that
up-
would have been kind of fascinating.
she teams up with the police officers way too easily.
Oh, yeah. Especially because in the beginning, because at first I thought that was going to be super hard for her to do, because in the beginning, Will Patton just kind of sees her, and then he's like, I know who will get us whatever, and then he just turns to the doctor. I'm like, oh, I guess I thought... I'm not saying that would have, like, been whatever, naturalistic, but I thought he was going to, like, pull Laurie out and be like,
Well,
what do you know?
I guess with these movies, the cops, another Star Wars tie-in, the cops have always been treated much like stormtroopers, where they've always been very easily manipulated. Just earlier on in the franchise, it was just Loomis was just above the law. Like, the cops would tell him to do something, and he'd just be like, I'm the only man that can control this. And they'd be like, but do you really? And he's like, well, I don't know, but I've got to find out. And he was just above the law. And it was very much the same in this one, where it's like...
Which makes no sense, because back then there was no Michael Myers. I mean, there was, obviously. But here it's like, okay, we know that Michael Myers likes to escape on Halloween night and murder children. So maybe we should just take that at face value.
Yeah, I know I mentioned this before we started the episode, and basically both of you just kind of said, well, this is the only way that the film could begin or whatever. But literally, they would really just move him for the first time in 40 years on Halloween night?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, with the...
What else were they going to do?
With the new...
I don't know. They could have done better. Come on.
They could have done better.
Come on, bro.
That would have been a lot of mental power where this movie does not need it. This movie needs that kind of thinking behind a lot of other parts. But moving him on a bus on Halloween night, like... Everything in the prologue of this movie should be settling down for a story we've heard before, only to find out that it's so much worse this time.
Which it's not.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm saying, like, I don't care how we got off the bus. I just care that after he steps off, you know, there's a reason for a new version of this.
See, let me throw this out to you guys and see what you think.
Okay, I'll throw it right back.
I thought when the stand-in Loomis had the moment where they hit Michael Myers with the car.
That he was going to say that he did it?
Well, to Alex's point, at that point I started becoming intrigued. I was like, oh, because I agree with you, Alex. Like I kind of thought early on, I'm like, really, this again? Like we're moving him on Halloween again?
Yeah.
At that point, I started seeing glimpses of, oh shit.
He orchestrated this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But not only orchestrated it, but I thought for a fleeting moment that because they didn't, what would have been more clever about this had been the guy that was the doctor, quote, was actually Michael Myers, and that the guy that was shown as Michael Myers that got hit by the car was just another person that was in on
He's
this escape.
shrunk 2 feet and talks now.
Well,
it would
I'm
be
just saying
very
that-
weird if we followed a character, got to know him even for a scene or two, and then he's like,
Sure.
and then he just stops talking once he
But
becomes.
to
Michael
Alex's
Myers.
point, though, had they condensed this down a little bit more and made it happen earlier on, it could have been a more clever way of an escape rather than just another typical run-at-the-mill, like, we put him on a bus and he beat the shit out of the driver and escaped. Like,
I will say this: if
Yeah.
there was any twist involving the Doctor that could have worked, besides him just giving one line of dialogue saying that he wanted him moved on Halloween because of this, you know, to get him to see Laurie, which I'm not saying that would have worked, but if we didn't see the Doctor too much in the beginning, but not only that, but maybe we see him for 1 second and whatever, and then we find out that he's not the Doctor, he's just one of the patients on the bus, and he was trying to collect Michael to basically have Michael be his, like, you know, killer, so to speak, as they ride off into Mexico and have a margarita on a beach.
Yeah, I feel like I would have
Hi.
we yeah, boy, we're just keeping this going. Nick, especially you, although you talked about it in our last episode, and even you offered one for the first time in quite a while. I know you're not a huge fan of talking about what you would have liked if they would have done this differently.
Yeah.
But I feel like I really was hoping that we were going to get something in this film that had there be an alternate motive for Michael Myers to not be just the same. He's going after Laurie because he's obsessed with her or whatever. I mean, obviously a lot of parts of that work, and that's totally fine. But again, you know, let's change this up a little bit. Like, see, you know what? That's what we need. We need Michael Myers with his shirt off on a beach, still with the combat boots on.
And we are talking about the actor Michael Myers. We are not talking about the
Hey,
character.
baby.
Okay.
Like, if you want to rewrite a story like this, don't you want to like do something with it?
No, and what you just said about what I said last week, as far as I'm normally I am like that in the sense that I don't want to say what a movie should do, but you forfeit that right as a movie when you're the 11th film in a franchise. Like, that's, you're begging to be said, what could we have done this time?
Mm-hmm.
So that I'm here, I think it's completely justified.
Yeah.
When you're a soul, whatever, then it's like, okay, they got their idea out, and this is how they wanted to do it. But no, when there's been 9 other movies, not including the first one, you're going to draw some criticism as to what you could have done to, make yourself stand out from the pack or tread new ground.
Especially when you're trying to eliminate the... See, that's wonderful. And that's the problem, is but that does go off of a little bit, and we are looking at a photo of Michael Myers.
The actor.
Floating in the pool.
Yeah, he actually kind of looks like Adam Sandler
I was
and Billy
gonna say
Madison.
Billy Madison.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
He's got a beer.
Nudie magazine day. Too damn hot for a penguin to be just walking around.
I got this shirt from Frank's.
God,
Frank's.
I haven't seen that movie in like 15 years, and yet I somehow still know every line.
Yeah. Yeah, boy.
Anyway. Should we go to final rating?
I think so,
Okay.
because we're just going to start doing lines from Billy Madison here.
I thought you were going to say lines of Coke.
That's a different party. But
That
that's all right.
escalated quick.
Say,
does.
goddamn!
I stabbed a man with a trident. Brick, I've been meaning to talk with you about that.
Probably going to want to lay low. Yeah. What other movies can we start quoting before we talk
Yeah,
about?
any of them. Big Lebowski.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Bunny. Suck your cock for $1,000.
We can go find an ATM machine.
Yeah, let me just go to a cash machine. Yeah. Dude, we really need you on this one. So I'll go first.
Okay.
Yep. I'm going to split this right down the middle and actually give this a 2.5 out of 5. And I really did want to like this more. I wanted to be able to give this a favorable rating, and I still do think that this is a movie that actually the better parts of it outweigh the negative, even though we've vastly talked about the negative on this episode. At the same time, though, this is still disappointing to me because just like with Jigsaw last year, which this is a better film than that, but at the same time, okay, you keep going back to that well if you want.
What?
Thinking that Jigsaw was good. The fuck out of here.
I didn't think it was that
Okay.
good.
Okay.
I don't think this is that good.
No, okay.
And to be completely honest, whether you think it's good or bad, I think Jigsaw felt more like Saw than this felt like Halloween.
Okay, I'll disagree with that. I mean, it feels like a Saw film, but at the same time, it's very similar to this, and it feels like it's bringing nothing new when it's supposed to be this resurgence in the series.
But technically, this movie
okay,
brought quote-unquote new things, and that's what dragged this whole movie down. So I'd rather a lackluster sequel than a movie saying, 40 years in the making, we're going to give you a lot of shit you don't need and barely scratch the surface on the shit that you've always loved about this franchise.
well put. That being said, I still think this is really in the same ballpark as something like Jigsaw. This is just a film that I think set itself up that it had to be really good, and it just wasn't. It was very mediocre. However, that being said, the kills that we did get to see, for the most part, were actually pretty good, I thought. And also, too, the last 20 to 30 minutes I thought were actually fantastic in this film, and that's what saves it ultimately. But it's a 2.5 out of 5 for me for the Halloween sequel that's called the same thing as the original. Kenny!
All right.
Oh boy, this is killing him right here. He doesn't want to say the wrong thing.
No, I'm still just so torn on how I feel about this. But ultimately, I'm gonna end up rating it much better than what it sounded all along like I'm going to. Because I'm gonna say I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5, and that's with a lot of room to potentially really up that grade, because I definitely think when I rewatch this a couple times, I'll find a lot more to like about it, and certain things will probably.
Boy, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope there is a lot more to like that we didn't get on the first viewing.
I think. I mean, we literally just watched it, to be totally clear about this. Like, we just came from the theater and are doing this show. So I think even after sleeping on it, I'll feel more positive about it. Truth be told, I think, and I mentioned this earlier, I think it was fine. I just think because I came in with this expectation of, holy fuck, they disregarded all the rest of the other movies, this better be something. If you take that away, like, it was fine. It was just fine. And that's what most of these movies are. They're just fine. Mm-hmm. It does its job. It comes in. It does what it needs to do. And that's that. Like, there's plenty to pick apart with all the Halloween movies and be like, well, that was just stupid. That was a poor decision. Where were they going with that? Of course, there's always that with Halloween. So I feel like once I get past that, I'll be a lot more positive about this movie. So it'd be a 3.5 for me right now with a lot of potential to be more positive. And as I'm looking around at early reviews, like, people are liking this movie so far. So
yeah, that was the early vibe on it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to echo Alex's rating and give it a 2.5 out of 5 because it just didn't really work for me. Like, I could watch it any day of the week, but having said that, I've seen only the first 4 Halloween movies and the 2 Rob Zombie Halloween movies, and this is my least favorite out of all 7 of these collected films. I haven't seen some of the worst Halloween movies, from what I understand, with Halloween Resurrection and The Curse of Michael Myers #6 and whatnot. But I prefer John Carpenter's original, obviously. I prefer the mediocre but a lot of fun sequel, which is actually kind of brilliant in the way it becomes a sequel. And
I still consider that the actual sequel, the original sequel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, John Carpenter was still technically involved, even if he didn't direct that. He was there at least somewhat guiding that script, even with the twist that I still don't really care for, but whatever. I actually loved the third movie. Obviously, it's not a Michael Myers movie, but it's a great Halloween movie, in my opinion. And actually, I think the fourth film is a lot of fun and has some good scares. I
love the fourth one.
Yeah. So all the Halloween movies I've seen, I literally like more than this one that I just saw.
And the zombie movies, as much shit as they get, I've been on record as saying I enjoy them, but they really brought way more to the table than this new one did.
And leave it to the fact that if they didn't exist, maybe I would like this a little more, because we haven't. If they didn't exist, we would not have any Halloween sequel that tries to take the lore of Laurie and Michael seriously. Yeah. But we have it 2 times over with Rob Zombie's aesthetic, and because I actually think those are great movies, this just kind of falters in comparison to that, even if you get Jamie Lee Curtis back giving it her all. So, yeah, I give it 2.5 out of 5. I thought the parts that were bad were actively bad, and the parts that were good, like some of the kills and whatnot, were still kind of half-assed, besides the last 20 minutes. And unfortunately, the last 20 minutes, even if it's as good as it is, yeah, I don't need to sit through an hour and 10 minutes to get to the last 20 minutes. That does not make a complete package. So, 2.5 for me.
Very good. So, if you have any thoughts out there on the new Halloween, always feel free to share them with us at filmtankshow@gmail.com, or if you try really hard, you might be lucky enough to find us every now and then on Facebook or Twitter, or even send us a photo on your feelings on Instagram at Film Tank Show. Kenny, as always, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you, and
thanks for having me back.
Hi.
See you next October.
Yeah, this fucking guy. We'll try to get you back for something else in there in between. I don't know, maybe, probably not.
Krampus
in December. Okay, that's
hey.
fine. Another horror movie. There you go. Look at that.
Hey, Christmas horror film is becoming like my favorite genre of anything right now. I have a shoebox. I have one box that is Christmas films, and then I have a shoebox full of Christmas horror films.
It might be terrible, but I really am looking forward to Anna and the Apocalypse. And that's not a horror film.
Oh, it's
but
in the genre.
The fact that it's a zombie...
That's a horror film.
Okay.
Is that a romantic comedy?
It's a zombie Christmas musical.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like right up your alley.
Oh, absolutely. I saw another trailer for it the other day, and certainly very much looking forward to that.
Good.
I just pivot very easily right after Halloween with Nightmare Before Christmas and just go right into the horror Christmas stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah.
It's a very easy transition.
You should watch a movie called Better Watch Out.
Okay.
It's one of those you don't want to read anything about it,
Okay.
but it takes a very Home Alone-esque home invasion thing and flips it on its head for very fucked up and awesome results. That's all I'll say.
I'm interested.
I'm basically have already told myself that I want you and Tucson to watch it, so we're all going to watch it. But definitely don't look anything up. It's one of those, that movie has a twist that's not at the end.
Okay, wonderful. I'm already on board. Should watch it sometime soon.
Boom.
So again, thank you very much to Kenny, and from he and Nick.
Hi.
And myself, Alex Diekman. Hi, as well.
Hi.
We will catch up with you next time here on Film Tank.